Thanks, Lennox. Our team across Africa has assisted New York exporters for 21 years now. We've been part of the Empire State Development and Global New York for it's been quite a trip. And during that period of time, Africa has gone from being a hinterland market where there didn't seem to be a lot going on. It was a real, when people thought of Africa, it was really a place for development and that kind of thing. But around the year 2000, something kicked in, and Africa's been a fast-growing market since then. And when you have a fast-growing market that's been growing quickly over 2 decades, you end up with compound interest that creates something that is big, something tremendous, and something you can't ignore. And so now Africa, after 2 decades of relatively fast growth, has come into a position where competitive markets and competitive companies cannot ignore the African market. And I'm going to be telling you that these trends will continue over the next years, even the next decades, until probably until the very end of this century. And if you're coming in to look at positioning yourself around the world, again, Africa cannot be ignored. So let's look at some of the things that we have to offer. If you can look at the map on the right side of your screen, that's where our staff are located, and a few of them are actually in the audience right now. I know that we've got someone from Ghana there, someone from Kenya, and recently we've been reaching out to the Caribbean, and we have somebody from Barbados there. But in fact, we have covered Africa extensively, and we don't just cover South Africa, although that's where our headquarter office is, but we cover the entire African continental free trade area, which has 1.3 billion people and an economy of approximately $3.5 trillion. So the African continental free trade area is an area that's forming into one common market, similar to what the European Union is, although not exactly similar. They've noted a few of the missteps that Europe has had in a very politicized kind of a way, and they're looking at creating more of an economic tie together. But in the end, it's going to be the largest common market by geography, and when it surpasses China, it's going to be the largest common market by population within a couple of years. This means as we see this market develop, we're going to be seeing a lot of commonalities across countries. It'll be easier to bring country exports into these markets because of the commonality of the regulatory environments, and we're going to be seeing things becoming a little more cohesive across the many markets of Africa. Right now, it's a very regionalized market, and I'll tell you that if you are sitting in New York City and you're looking at this map, you're actually closer to Dakar than I am sitting here in Durban. So that gives you an idea about the extensive size of this continent. It is huge. You can fit approximately 4 continental USAs into the territory that we cover. And in terms of cultural diversity, it is extraordinarily extensive. We are not a monolithic market. Africa is not really one place. Africa is a series of regional markets that you can look at, and you can start developing as a company as you come into the decision to work into Africa. So I would like to say that many of our staff have extensive experience working with American companies and companies from New York State particularly, and we've done it gladly for many years. I have one of the best teams in the world working with us, and I will put my neck out and say anywhere in the world. We really have in Africa one of New York's finest examples of a team that can really pull things together and work hard and help companies toward their sales in this market. So just quickly, you can see that everywhere across the world we've been hit relatively by the coronavirus pandemic, and it hasn't been pleasant. Now, Africa is not going to be shrinking as much as a lot of other markets. We're looking at probably a minus 2.1% decrease coming over the 2020 year. But the contraction is not going to last, and in fact, we're starting to see rebounds in a lot of markets. Now, going into some of the regional markets of Africa, most of Africa is either around zero or growing at 1 to 2% right now. So it hasn't actually contracted. South Africa's contracted a fair amount. Nigeria has, Angola has. So where the economies are oil tied, they've really been hit by that. That's Saudi Russia oil feud that went on for a few months and now looks to have dissipated as oil prices are going up. But we're seeing that a lot of the countries across Africa, particularly those that are oil import dependent, have actually done well. And this is interesting. So the markets are generally going to be doing okay as we look at reaching into the coming months, and particularly as we look at a rebound right now. So where we can see some of the hits have taken place are in where the country has a lot of remittances that come into it from abroad, from families abroad, and where we've seen other extended debts that have been affected by this. And immediately upon when we looked at the stock market crashing and things like that, we saw a lot of the emerging market currencies crash. They haven't quite recovered yet, but we're seeing an improvement, and as the markets are improving, we're seeing the volatility improved in the direction of improved currencies, which gives the countries here more buying power and gives your ability to sell abroad into market to sell. So even against the euro, for example, the American dollar fell to, I think, about $1.06 to the euro, and now it's up to 118. So we're actually seeing, again, American companies by about 10% against the euro, and approximately the same amount against companies. Now, what has really happened is, as there's been a lot of smoke around COVID, we've seen that China has been very active and not very positively toward a lot of its neighbors. But what really has happened is that China is now on the back foot diplomatically. There have been a lot of African countries that haven't taken kindly to the situation that the Chinese grants for big projects have gotten them into in terms of debt. There hasn't been a lot of pleasure in terms of watching China in Hong Kong, watching China against Taiwan, Japan, even Russia now. China said that Vladivostok belongs to Greater China, and India. India is also a close working partner with Africa and also America. People are watching the news, and China is diplomatically on the back foot. They have created an environment where American exporters are viewed more positively in Africa right now. And this is the flip side of all of this. China has come to be the largest trading partner in Africa over the last decade for most countries of Africa. But it's possible for you to come in as an American and understanding that there is a downside to China's relevance in Africa. There is a lot of fatigue, and it is really apparent. So keep in mind that this is also a recent occurrence. One thing that you have to be aware of, that by the time 2050 rolls around, most of the world's new labor force is going to be coming from Africa. You will not be able to ignore this. We have a very fast-growing middle class of young people, and we're going to be talking about the growth of the middle class and the dynamic that's changed. If you have a fast-growing demographic, it could be relatively negative if there's no growth. But we do have good growth across Africa relatively. We're not the fastest in the world. Southeast Asia is beating us by a little bit. India is beating us by a little bit. But looking at where the presence of the middle class is and where the overall growth is happening, we're looking at an extended growth pattern which is augmented by the population growth, and that trend is augmented by a GDP per capita growth, which creates an exponential curve in terms of the possibilities for the African business market. So even if we look at the on the right hand side of the screen, if we look at some of the population estimates by the United Nations and by other groups, there is a possibility that both trends look like by the end of this century we're going to see declining populations globally. But in Africa, we're going to see a faster growth overall, and we're going to see a young population, because right now the population of Africa has an average age of 19.7, and there's countries inside Africa like Nigeria with average ages of 17. Now, when those people get to be 25 and 30, already are, if you look at who's wealthy across Africa and you look at who's got control of the polity, you're looking at young people, which is amazing. They're tied into to what's happening globally. They're tied into innovation. They're tied into technology, and they're able to maneuver in this global world. And so we have a lot of excitement coming up with the African population in general, the middle class youth particularly, and that is really where the key thing is going to be happening in terms of the big macro dynamic movement in the world. And I'm going to tell you, this is also a big change when you look at this shift in populations from the Far East back over toward the center of the globe, or the center of the map as you see it there. We're seeing already diminishing populations in a lot of the Far Eastern countries. And so as we see that trend happening, we're going to be looking at Africa coming out as a large, important common market. So, all right, I'm clicking, but it's okay. Here we go. All right. So we've seen that African democracies have benefited substantially off of social stability, and social stability is benefiting off of democratic movements. And so from prior to 1990, most of Africa was not democratic. And even if you look at that old map from 1987, and I would say that South Africa, again, only partially democratic, but most of the people didn't have the vote here at that time. So really it was really a post-revolutionary kind of politically a dystopia right across the continent in a lot of ways, with a few shining lights from here and there. But if you look at the map by 2015, most of Africa had become strongly democratic. The values for democracy and creating freedom of choice in the polity and being able to choose your government, those ideals have become ensconced in the African polity. And we've had many, many successful government transitions where the party has relinquished party power to another party coming in, and it's been peaceful. And so this is the trend across Africa right now. And we're seeing that Africa is no longer a place where we're stuck with a lot of dictatorships, where we're stuck with a lot of corruptions. In fact, along with this trend, we're seeing a decline in corruption, and I'll get to that as well. So with the under 30s particularly, and I'd also say the under 40s, young people are becoming more leaning toward more traditional values still in terms of their family traditions and their faith communities, which are both inclusive and very strongly ordered here in Africa, but they've also become very accomplished and focused on becoming middle class through their own individual merit, through the strength of their individual accomplishments. And so the value of education that has come from the families has created a, I don't want to say a competitive, because it's not exactly that, but it's not the collectivism of their parents' generations. And this is really important to understand. The middle class youth of Africa are not the middle class youth of Africa that existed back around the turn of the century. This is a new group of young people. And as we've seen the social dynamic in the USA change fairly significantly, it's also changed in Africa, but it hasn't changed in the same ways. We've got young people who have come from relatively poor backgrounds that work extraordinarily hard, long hours, and have measurably, in sociological terms, one of the most entrepreneurial cultures in the world. So this is really the thing that's changing Africa, and this is why Africa's got a long-term outlook that is extraordinarily positive. So I just say that as we look at the changes that happened in East Asia starting in the late 1970s with Deng Xiaoping's alteration of the Chinese Communist Party's vision for China to become more capitalistic, you know, we're seeing that Africa, relatively speaking, is in that same positioning right now, but 60% of business can be conducted in English across the African continent. A big portion of it can also be conducted in French or Arabic and a little bit in Portuguese, but a lot of it in English. And even people in a lot of the French-speaking countries, the Arabic-speaking countries, and Portuguese-speaking countries can speak English, particularly the young middle class. And with access to online information, if China had that at the end of the 1970s, imagine where China would be now. So China has really shown a bit of a pathway, an analogy, but and a lot of the other Southeast Asian countries have as well in smaller amounts because they've got smaller populations. But in Africa, we're going to be seeing something very similar because we've got a big demographic bubble that is positively oriented and has a lot of the right ingredients to make a lot of things happen. And I would argue too that right now across the world, people are not valuing capital goods. What they're valuing is human talent. And this is something that has really increased over the last few years. Creativity has become the #1 requirement for new jobs. If you look at where creativity went as in terms of a character aspect, to really come up in the rankings in terms of what employers are looking for. Innovation, ability to change, adaptability. You get that with a youth movement. You get that with the youth cohort that can absorb those kinds of things and be creative. Africa doesn't have a lot of the capital, but capital is fungible. You can move and invest in good ideas. And this is what we're seeing. We're already seeing this. Property values across a lot of the major markets of Africa have increased substantially. If you go to Nairobi or Accra or other markets, you're seeing that, and that's a result of capital flowing back into Africa. So don't think that Africa is a place that you can come in and come in with a I don't know, a secondhand product or a secondhand idea or something that's worked for 3 generations. The generations here are looking for something that's new, world-class, that is going to be bringing them into the next decades of success for their companies. So very quickly, I'll touch on the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. It has been put back a little bit in terms of the operational phase, but it's going to be starting on the 1st of January, and we can see the possibilities there. It will boost Africa's economy substantially by breaking down the trade barriers between countries initially, and that's really the first phase of it. Within about possibly trademark requirements, possibly a lot of different things that are going to be commonalities right across Africa. So if you get into one market and you start to understand the implications of the free trade area, you're going to be one up on your competition because you're going to start understanding the commonalities for this huge market that's going to be really, really important as you develop your markets across Africa. It doesn't mean that you may not have to decide to go into different regional markets if you want a complete spread for your product line or service, but you are going to be you're going to be aware that regulatory environment is going to be becoming more unified, just as it has been in Europe. No presentation is complete except with statistics. So there's a few of them about South Africa. I'd just like to say that if you're here in South Africa right now and under lockdown, you're probably in one of the most beautiful places you could be locked down. Emerging market economies have emerging market problems. And so you can guess that there are issues in South Africa, but problems do create opportunities. And if you're also looking at this entire pandemic situation, this generation, the way digitalization and all kinds of other things have been hitting the world, you can also think about, and you're looking at this as a positive thing. Remember that most successful companies have come up during a time of change or when a lot of other companies have been under stress. And this is a great time to come in and take some of your competitors' market share and start to look at where you want to go globally, but also across Africa. So I'd also just like to say, and you can probably tell by my accent, I'm actually a Canadian by birth. I have lived in the United States while I was growing up as a teenager. And so I do have my roots back in North America. And if you're watching this from Rochester or Buffalo, I used to watch Commander Tom from across the lake when I was a kid. You know, we have a really interesting and very welcoming economy here. The people here are very welcoming to Americans. I'd also like to just tell you that Americans are respected for the way they do business and generally their culture for right across Africa. And this is unlike a lot of other cultures that come in to do business. So as an American, and even as you're sitting there in New York, which is one of the brand name states across the United States, people don't recognize names like Oklahoma or Iowa. They recognize New York, and that's for sure. And you tell them you're from New York, USA, and they will want to hear things about where you live. So you have a competitive advantage just being where you are right now and coming into a new market like South Africa. I'd just like to say that with the work that we've been doing really recently with American companies coming in, we have been very busy. And we've been very busy in certain sectors. So I'm going to really try to target where you can be successful right now. The first thing is agricultural technology. New York is, and if you're sitting in New York City, you might not realize this, but New York is an agricultural titan in terms of its exports, in terms of the tech that's available, in terms of the development. So New York is one of America's largest agricultural states, and this is important because for the rest of the world, if you look at Africa, for example, we still have 60% of the world's available arable land, and we're looking at a huge growing population and the ability to feed the rest of the world. This is one area that's really important. Information technology and cyber tech. We've seen a lot of interest here for companies in that area right across Africa. And this is particularly in an era where desperate criminals are looking for desperate means to take money from desperate people. And if you look at where companies are right now, they really need to get their protective walls up, and they understand that. And so we're seeing a really strong growth right across the demand for cyber tech particularly, but IT in general. Medical equipment and healthcare requirements, we're seeing very good responses. And mining equipment, don't think New York is not a mining state because you've got a lot of really great success stories from our office even in the mining sector, where there's simulation training, where there's specialty materials, where there's vehicles, there's all kinds of things that go into the mining sector that may be ancillary to the mining sector, but areas like communication, where New York is in a top position, or even some of the nanotech that's coming out of the Albany area. These are areas that are really important. And then looking at the other areas where we're looking at maybe neither fast growth, but it hasn't been hit badly completely. Automotive is bouncing back here. Ghana just opened its first automotive assembly plant for BMW just recently, which is awesome. Aviation right across Africa, we've got requirements for all kinds of aviation right across the continent, with Nairobi and as a new up-and-coming maintenance and repair operations location in Johannesburg is one of the world's existing large places for that. Keep in mind that when companies go out of business, that creates opportunities for others. So the aviation market right across Africa is in a bit of a state of flux, but that's also a good thing for companies coming in. Chemicals, Africa is very important for chemical manufacturing, infrastructure, machinery, power generation and supply, including renewable energy, where we can't get to things very quickly, railroad, port, and road technologies and telecommunications. So just getting into agritech quickly, I did mention that we have a really important need here in Africa, but particularly in the automation and where agriculture becomes digitalized. This is really important to where companies are going right now. Yes, there is less expensive labor here in Africa than there is in other places, but global competition means that labor is becoming less and less of a total proportion of the manufacturing of food and food processing. So it is important for companies to have all kinds of access to the right information at the right time, and digitalization and mechanization are part of that. So really important to consider that sector. And if you're in the agri-tech sector, we'd like to hear from you, and probably right away, because this is something that it's a sector that hasn't slowed down across Africa. The next thing is, just very quickly, you see a map of the cell phone coverage across South Africa, or for the market is considered in South Africa going to be going up this year, even with the pandemic going on. So let's consider that, and you can see that how the market is spliced into different segments. All of these segments are important, and almost everything in the IT sector comes from somewhere else, and most of that somewhere else is America. So if you're coming in with specialty cyber tech, if you're coming in with specialty management systems, if you're coming in with educational platforms, if you're coming in with all kinds of new things, this is really where there's a lot of opportunity. Just quickly, my wife runs an educational healthcare company, and her company business was practically wiped out because all the training happened in person. And how can you have in-person training? So she's flipped over the whole company over the last 3 months and turned it into a completely digital affair, moved a lot of chairs and tables around the room, and has started rolling out completely digital courses in her segment of the healthcare sector, making her a pioneer across Africa in what she does. So, you know, it doesn't take a lot. It takes knowing what you know and trying to find out what you don't know to create a successful solution. Competency and conscientiousness will get you 80% of the way toward your goal in the African market. And just being in place is most of the rest of the 20%. But being able and being tied in with the relationships that you create for business is going to be really important for you. Healthcare, Again, it's an area that in general is growing at twice the rate of the national economies. So where we've seen economies like Ghana growing at 7 or 8%, we've seen the healthcare economy growing at about 12%. Where it's been growing at about 7% or 6% in Kenya, we've seen growth of about 9, 10, 11% for the healthcare economy. So right across the board, healthcare is a strong market, and high tech, good tech, appropriate tech for primary and secondary care is going to be really important. Africa isn't looking for the cheapest solution, but they're looking for an affordable best solution. And if you can put your head around that kind of thing, a lot of good American companies are moving here in big ways in the healthcare sector. Very important to remember. Mining tech, I did touch on this. I don't expect there's a lot of companies in the mining tech sector, but one area I didn't touch on was water remediation, soil remediation, water remediation. It's really important to understand that the mining market here is mostly open pit, open cast mining, as we call it here in South Africa, and understanding that the ecological side of mining is creating problems and it's creating challenges, and these things are important to solve as the middle class population becomes more educated about the environmental concerns that they've got. So I just like to say that we're here to help you with your helping you build your analytical toolbox. And so here are just a few of the things that we do. Most of what we do is assist New York companies to find buyers and to build in, whether that's a long-term buyer through a distributor, or if you're an industrial company, perhaps there's only 3 or 4 major buyers, or maybe if you're selling to an electrical generation monopoly, maybe there's only 1 buyer in the market. So we do have end buyer searches there. But keep in mind that we typically come through these as looking at things through a regional market lens. So Southern Africa, you might want to look at South Africa. If you're looking at West Africa, maybe if you're looking at East Africa, it might be Kenya or Tanzania. But every solution is going to be a little bit different for different companies. Catherine Bamberger, maybe you could introduce a bit about the trade mission that's coming up. And Catherine is going to be leading our trade mission that was mentioned in February. So Catherine, why don't you just say a few words about that as we're looking at our office services?
Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. Yes, we did have a trade mission to South Africa scheduled for June. At this point, we've delayed it until February, but we also are considering other options. Part of the service is we incorporate our export marketing assistance service, which is our market survey and customized briefing document, as well as a customized potential partner or distributor list. We work with the consultants that Richard has on his team to make sure that they've understood your company well enough to be able to make the match with your best potential clients or partners, and what that might look like in South Africa in particular, or on the continent. At this point in time, we are entertaining additional companies. If after this presentation you think that you might be interested, you can go on the Global New York website and complete the STEP grant application for Step 7. And indicate that you are interested in the South African trade mission. We would welcome additional companies at this point, and we still have plenty of time to do that market research for you in advance. Ideally, we'll be able to travel to the market. We'll have exported briefings with some of our federal partners, as well as some local industry experts. And then we help organize face-to-face visits. Should that not be able to happen by February, we will probably organize something along virtual lines, but again, customized one-on-one appointments, either via Skype or Zoom or whatever the emerging technology is at that point.
Thank you, Catherine. Catherine's been ably managing the administration on the New York side, and we're in regular conversations with her in terms of the developments and the company needs. So I'd also really just like to say that, Catherine, the word consultant sounds very cold. We're here to help companies make sales, and my team are really geared toward working with companies, not on a company level, but on a personal level, and that's really the important thing. And we'd like you to understand too that as you get into working in Africa and around the world, and we're hoping mission. Right now, it's still not possible to fly back and forth as a business traveler between America and South Africa, but emerging markets generally are making up about half of the world's economy right now. Emerging market people typically are very relationship based. They really prefer in-person is not going to be the end-all and be-all. We're seeing a big idea is use your digitalization to make your personal meetings count across the world, and you're going to see your company really benefit. So I'm sticking my neck out, and I'm going to be saying that after the pandemic is over, personal relationships are going to become more important. And the reason it's going to become more important is because everybody's going to be doing the virtual thing. Everybody's going to think that the virtual thing is going to continue to exist. But those people that are making the flights and doing the personal meetings are going to be making the sales, and they've got a competitive advantage, particularly when over half of the world's market, and probably well over half of the world's market, is not transactional, as you see in the American business culture. So this is one thing that we've got to be aware of. So just a quick touch on our office. You can see that the sun is shining over our office there in South Africa. We've got a lot of really great team who are stationed right across Africa to help all of your needs in terms of export. Looking forward to working with you. I think I'm going to hand it back over for a question and answer period, but right now we are really on standby to help companies make. Thanks for your time, everybody.